Recently, I graduated college and moved away from home to start a new job. I downsized from a large family house with a wide open garage to a 2-bedroom apartment. I love my new apartment, but it doesn't have very much space for working on projects like my old garage had. I'm tired of not working with my hands and I want to start my own projects. And I don't need expensive tools to do that. In order to build in my apartment, I'm still going to need a few things. First, I'll need a workspace, someplace where I can spread out and get a little messy. Since I don't have any other tables, I'll be using my dining room table as my workspace. Since this is the table I also use for eating, I want to make sure it doesn't get ruined. To ensure that, I'm laying down some construction paper and making sure it stays put. The first project I want to make is a wooden frame to showcase 3 CDs. The CDs will be mounted with red backing to go with my living room. Before we get started, let's visualize our project. Visualizing is great because we can think about how to assemble our project in steps, making it easier and less frustrating than just diving straight in. Since we have the CDs on hand, it's easy to just trace around them and get a rough sketch of the frame we'll be making. You could also use software for this, but for this project, a rough sketch is enough to get the job done. In order to get accurate measurements, we'll need to measure the CDs and add dimensions to our sketch. For our width, we'll add 3 CDs plus 2 backings plus 2 frame lengths. The borders and frame around the CDs will both be 1 inch thick, so our overall width will be 22.5 inches. For our height, we'll add 1 CD, 2 backings, and 2 frame lengths, for a total height of 9 inches. Next, we'll think about how the frame will join together. We could go with straight cuts, but I think we can do better than that. Let's try a 45-degree joint called a miter. Since we're going to make miter joints, we'll first need a miter box. I got this saw and box combo for $15 at Home Depot. It locks the wood into place and guarantees that our angles will be 45 degrees. For wood, I bought squared maple because it's cheap and relatively easy to cut through. I needed 2 lengths because of the dimensions of my frame. Measure the wood, mark the dimensions, and draw the 45-degree lines. Try to line up the 45-degree line with the line in the miter box. Use the included pieces to hold the wood firmly so it doesn't go anywhere. Begin making your cuts. After sawing, make sure that your cuts are the correct dimensions. Now we should have the basic outline of the frame. In order to get the frame to stick together, we need wood glue and some tape. Dab a little glue on the ends and paint all over the surface with your fingers. Full coverage is very important. The taping method holds the frame relatively tightly, which is all we need for this project. Place the frame together, secure the tape, and look for any spots that didn't quite connect. Add extra glue, or, like in my case, retape one side completely if needed. Let that sit for about an hour or so, and try to elevate the frame so it doesn't also stick to your surface. After it's dry, it's time for the unorthodox fall test. After drying, check your edges to see that they're all square and level. Mine weren't, so I had to sand some of them down. Give the entire frame a quick sanding, and after that, it's time to move on to paint. Make sure to also paint the edges and corners of this frame really well. The construction paper should ensure that your paint doesn't seep through into your table. I gave my frame 3 coats of paint, but I actually liked the way that it looked after just 1. Use your best judgment. In order for this ultralight beam to fade to black completely, we just need to let it be overnight. For the backing of this frame, I'm going to use a deep red poster board I picked up at a craft store. Since we'll be gluing only CDs to this, it doesn't have to be very strong. Alternatively, you could use cardboard and paint it to the color of your choice. We don't actually have to measure this at all if we line up the frame and poster correctly. After we cut the backing, I'll be attaching it to the frame using 4 screws, 1 in every corner. These screws are small, so I'm not too worried about them cracking the wood. Even though this frame is likely never to be seen from the side, I decided to Sharpie in the poster board edges so that they were also black. Oh, and I added 1 small detail. Looks just like the real thing. Since I wanted the CDs to have a 1-inch gap from the frame and each other, I can recycle the extra frame pieces from earlier. Using these, I can space them apart perfectly without having to measure anything. I use super glue to mount these CDs, but double-sided tape, epoxy, or even hot glue would also do the trick. It doesn't have to be very strong. Our last step is to simply attach the mounting hardware. and now our frame is done. I think my favorite thing about using construction paper for a project like this is that after the project is done and I don't want to clean up, I don't have to. Just roll up the construction paper and throw it away. It's time to talk about these CDs. I chose to use Metallica's Black Album, Kanye West's Yeezus, and the Beatles' White Album. Growing up, I had many different phases that I went through, but I've never really left my Metallica, Kanye, or Beatles phase. These aren't necessarily my favorite albums by these artists, but I think these cases are simple yet bold enough to catch the eyes of anyone in the room.